Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Looking at shares of Meta here following that TikTok ruling. Up about 3% right now, a little more than $18. Remember, Donald Trump said if you get rid of TikTok, well, that's going to help Mark Zuckerberg. And there are questions about exactly where this is all going today. It's just one of the things that we want to talk about with Congressman Tim Burchett on a busy Friday. Did I mention you have made it to the threshold of the weekend? It feels nice today. Now, lawmakers have left town after spending some time here in Washington. Tim Burchett might be an exception. Everyone's still talking about the 15-minute Christmas party. Congressman, welcome back to Bloomberg. It's great to see you, sir. You've got the most famous barn jacket in Washington here for our viewers. And I wonder your thoughts on this ruling. This basically keeps in place the bill that you voted for. I was looking at a news release a short time ago, 13 March, from your office. Burchett votes to require CCP-affiliated company to divest from TikTok. So has anything changed following this ruling today?
Well, not with me, and I know I'm on opposite sides where President Trump is. I would hope that we could get China out of that business. When China's out of it, I'd be okay with it. It's just another, currently right now, I think it's just another avenue for the communist Chinese to indoctrinate our children, and we should watch that because of the way they target them and through algorithms and stuff that I really don't understand. But I know that when I was talking about aluminum Solo cups the other day. My wife and I were talking about them, and then all of a sudden we both get ads on our phones about them. And so they're listening to us, and as we're listening to them. So I would hope parents would be very cautious with that.
Happens to the best of us, right, Congressman? You're talking to your wife, like you said, you mentioned something, that I'm getting all these ads. I didn't know it was the Chinese doing it, though.
Well, they with TikTok, it is. I think they're undermined. They don't even allow it in their own country. In their country, it's an educational device. Over here, it's just a marketing tool for some whacked out clauses. I think that's why you're seeing some, in my opinion, you saw a rise in mental issues with children after COVID, because when they were blocked off from the world, that's all they had to communicate with was their cell phones. Mm-hmm. And I think they're using that. I think they're using that to undermine our society. And I just think it's a real tough thing. It's tough enough being a kid growing up today, and it's even tougher if you got somebody whispering in your ear continuously about you're too fat, you're not pretty, you're not strong enough, you're this or that. And I just think that we should really be careful about what we expose our children to.
Well, listen, I know this is a real issue for a lot of parents. As you put it in your statement that day, you voted against allowing ByteDance to control what you called an enormous information mining source in the United States. You also mentioned Donald Trump just now. Do we really know how he feels about this? I know he had said on the campaign trail that he might work to save TikTok, but he also took action to ban it when he was in office. Where do you think he really falls down on this?
I think he falls down the sides of, I hope, on patriotism and in the American way. If we could get the communist Chinese influence out of it, I think it would probably pass muster. But until then, I'll still be sticking where I'm at. I don't trust them. They do not have our best interests at heart. And I'm very cautious of anything they have anything to do with.
Well, you think it's as good as banned then? I mean, we're looking at a January deadline here.
Well, every time it's sort of like when we say we're going to ban all these crazy random phone calls from our cell phone from these marketing groups and things. We banned it for about 3 minutes, and then they figured out a way around it. If it affects their pocketbooks, they'll do it. But if not, they'll claim they can't do it. And it's like when they say they can't. The FBI says they can't crack into somebody's computer or whatever, and then Musk brings somebody out and they get into it in 15 minutes. I think if the financial incentives there, they can do it. Otherwise, they're not going to do it.
Well, Congressman, I want to ask you about what's happening or will happen on the floor of the House in the next couple of weeks here, because you've got some business to take care of. There is news today. House GOP leadership plans to put the NDAA on the floor next week. I understand there's a bit of a difference with the Senate when it comes to top line numbers there, but then it's a matter of funding the government. And we understand that the Speaker wants to see a vote on the CR, not sure how long it'll last, in the week of December 16th. Will that just get us through the new year so you can come back and finish, or push us to March? Or what's the right plan here?
Well, that remains to be seen. I don't want to hamstring President Trump in the first 100 days. I have traditionally not been for CRs. I think we're abdicating our duties. You know, we're really constitutionally bound to do one thing, and that's pass a budget. And we haven't done that in 30 years. And that's by design. Both parties love it. When you pass, they drop a 3,000-page bill on your desk, and you got 2 hours to read it. And all you do is look for the stuff in your district, or which lobbyist you're going to grease, or where your wife and or your girlfriend, which group they work for. And then you end up voting for those terrible things. And that's why we're, $36 trillion in debt. So I think we need to do like we do in Tennessee in the legislature, single issue spending bills. And people will say, well, Burchett will be here all night. Well, you pay us over $170,000 a year, dadgummit. We ought to be here all night working. These 2-hour work days to me are kind of annoying. It doesn't sell well back in Tennessee, I can tell you that. And until we treat this as it is, what it is, it's just going to continue getting worse.
What I want to ask you about the matter of supplemental funding, because you obviously are in a state that was impacted by the hurricanes that tore through the Southeast a couple of months ago. Should that be added to the CR for the sake of expediting that money, expediting that money, I should say, or should that go into an actual budget, assuming there's regular order in the new year?
Well, make no bones about it. If they put it in there, they're just trying to get more votes. It's funny money. They're spending money we do not have. It's our great-grandchildren. You say we're spending our kids' money. Man, we're spending our great-grandchildren's money right now. It's just more of the same. If we managed our money better, we wouldn't be in this situation. You know, I've got people still up there who have been standing in line, and they're told they can't get a $750 check because guess what? They don't have a cell phone. They don't have a dadgum computer. They don't have any identification. It got washed away in the flood, for goodness sakes. And you got some smart aleck bureaucrat up there telling them no, or they've got these houses for them that are 2 hours away. They'll end up losing their jobs, and they can't maintain their own property. This thing's a nightmare. It is a trash can. Quit picking and choosing things to clean out of it. We need to turn it upside down like a trash can, put a garden hose on it, and dismantle all these groups that are doing this stuff. And you know, we had, when it all went down, Franklin Graham's group, Samaritan's Purse was up there, Mountain Pride, all these other groups are up there on the ground. FEMA still, there, as of about a month ago, there's people in North Carolina still haven't seen anybody from FEMA. So
wow.
I think.
Are you saying FEMA's the trash can or the government, or I just want to understand, Congressman?
Well, they're part of it. FEMA is a trash can in itself, in my opinion. You might have some good people up there, but it's just you know, when you're in a Walmart parking lot playing God with these people's lives, staying in a $300 a night motel, and they don't have running water or electricity, and then you're giving over $1 billion to illegals, and we got American citizens that have paid into the system that are being turned away. To me, that's a real problem, and that there's an arrogance there. There's a lack of connectivity. I think what FEMA needs to be is just a flow through for money that can get to these organizations that actually do the job, like Samaritan's Purse.
Well, we do like to think that there are some patriotic Americans working for FEMA who are trying to help people out. Congressman, I'm glad that you could join us today, and happy holidays to you. I hope you still got some Cheese Whiz left over after the big party yesterday. He's a member of the House Oversight, Foreign Affairs, Transportation Committee's Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
As we turn to the transition, it's been a very busy week here in Washington, D.C. with Donald Trump's nominees for some awfully important jobs walking the halls of the Senate. As we've told you, we've walked you through all of these alongside names like Pete Hegseth, who has had quite the journey personally and professionally, I think we can say this week, with allegations from sexual assault to alcohol abuse following him into all of these meetings, including the sit down with Joni Ernst that we heard so much about. She is still not a yes based on what we're hearing, and some are suggesting that this could be a short run here for Pete Hegseth, as Donald Trump also talks to Ron DeSantis about potentially having the job. I've got a little bit of news for you on Ron DeSantis, by the way. But let's hear from Hegseth from last night, talking about some of the doubts surrounding his confirmation on Capitol Hill. Let's listen.
To senators who are the ones that deserve answers to every question they have. And in every office we've stood in, we've welcomed that opportunity. It has been a great week. It's a process that's ongoing, and we look forward to finishing it.
Wanted to talk to a sage, someone who understands how Capitol Hill works when it comes to the transition and to all the matters we just discussed with Tim Burchett here, creeping up on a funding deadline and a whole new Congress. Lisa Camooso Miller is, of course, that voice, Republican strategist, host of the Friday Reporter podcast, and former communications director at the Republican National Committee. Lisa, great to see you. Happy Friday and welcome back. You've got deep contacts at the Pentagon, and I know that you're closely associated with the national security and defense spaces. There are a lot of concerns, not only about some of the personal issues surrounding Pete Hegseth, and he denies them all, but even just his lack of managerial experience. Now, before I ask you whether you think he's going to get through the week, we've got a headline here. Donald Trump is going to the Army-Navy game, and he's bringing Ron DeSantis with him this weekend. Now, what do you think about Pete Hegseth?
I've been watching all week, Joe, and I think that the time is running out for this nominee. That's my point of view. This has been a tremendous distraction from the transition and from Donald Trump's, ascension back to the White House. So to me, it just doesn't add up. There's so many reasons why this nominee is not the right nominee. It seems like an unforced error, and one that on all accounts, will not possibly make it to Sunday. That would be if I had $2 to put on this one, Joe, I'd say Sunday is the day.
Wow. All right. So he's not doing well, obviously, and it's not going to be another John Tower. Some folks thought, you know what? Donald Trump says he's going to stand by his man. He said so just this morning. So let's let this thing go through committee and see what the senators can do. That's not the way this ends, in your view.
It just doesn't feel that way, Joe. It just feels like the energy is running out for Hegseth. I mean, yes, he's making some progress on the Hill. He's having meetings and he's answering questions. And that's really part of the process for sure. But to me, all of the other optics behind the scene, all of the questions about whether or not, it sounds like he may already have a pick in mind after Hegseth goes away. So to me, more than anything, I feel like he's probably hearing from the Senate. He's probably hearing from his colleagues in the party. He's hearing from colleagues and people that he knows and works with well inside the Pentagon and inside the national defense space. It just seems to me like this is an unnecessary fight to take on. And it seems like one that might go the way that the Gates nominee went, and that is that he would bow out knowing that it's too big a distraction.
Well, you know what's going to happen next, Lisa, is we're going to turn to Tulsi Gabbard. And considering everything that's blowing up literally right now in Syria, you've got a lot of people saying that she might not make it either. What is that process going to look like?
This is like a whack-a-mole situation, Joe. It seems to me like there are really 4 nominees that are very, very vulnerable. The first one we've already seen go, and that's Gates. I think Hegseth, number 2. Seems like Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy is also on the chopping block. Those 2 guys they'll be the next ones. And look, if you're the transition, you knew that these were going to be controversial and that they potentially might not be nominees that would ultimately get through. But also, it to me feels like it may have even been a strategy. It may have been by design that that some of these nominees were a little bit out of the box and were an opportunity for nominations beyond those to be ones that would sail right through. So to me, I think that we're going to see that Tulsi Gabbard will be the next one we look very closely at, and we see as one that will also not likely make it over the finish line.
Well, I got to throw this one at you because you mentioned Matt Gaetz. Don't make me bring up Matt Gaetz, Lisa. I have been hearing over the last couple of days a growing level of concern that he is going to show up to fill his seat in January as elected. He has not filed paperwork suggesting otherwise and has only said that he intends to step down. What happens if he shows up? Do you think he does it?
I mean, I hate to say it, Joe, but these are politicians. I mean, so much about politics is ego, right? And so when you step away, he won that seat. And so if he's not going to be AG and he's not going to be a replacement for the U.S. Senate or a candidate for governor in Florida, then in his mind, the way he's moving, seems like he would go back potentially to that seat. The only thing that I think holds him back from doing that is the possibility that then that ethics report that so far has held as a secret and not been released potentially could be by those who want to see him go away for good.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because the House last night blocked the release of that ethics committee report, having forced a vote on this. We talked about that privileged resolution from Sean Casten. Does this thing have to leak now? Because it's going to come out, Lisa, right?
It's coming, Joe. It's just, I mean, the joke in Washington is if you want something out there, you tell Capitol Hill, right? So to me, it seems like it is very likely that will get out. Matt Gaetz has made no friends on Capitol Hill. He's done everything to make enemies. And there are plenty of people that aren't even in the House anymore that want to see him go away. So to me, this feels like the other shoe that drops for him. And it's one that really would cause him a tremendous amount of discomfort and legal trouble moving forward. So for him, I don't know. I don't think the risk outweighs the reward. But like I said, in politics, it's a lot of ego, and a lot of it has to do with how the particular candidate feels about themselves.
Well, let's do a little lame duck lightning round here, Lisa. Don't you miss the lame duck when you were working in the Speaker's office? Mike Johnson is trying to craft a plan here. We've got 2 weeks to go until the government runs out of money. The plan as we see it now is to get the NDAA on the floor next week, even though they cannot agree on top lines with the Senate, and then a vote on the CR the week of December 16th. Is that actually going to work, and do we avoid a shutdown? How much breathing room do we get?
Oh, it's going to happen, Joe. It always happens. It's messy. You and I talk about it, twisting our pearls in our hands, waiting for it to go down. But yeah, the NDAA is going to get done. There's no doubt about it. It'll be negotiation. They'll be back and forth. They'll have to decide whether or not they want to do it under a rule suspension or, what that all comes down to. But funding for the Department of Defense and for the support of the country and national security is one that everybody has to come together on ultimately. And funding the government is another one. I mean, there's no way we come to the end of the year without that getting done. Now, there'll be plenty of threats for having to stay late, having to stay long, having to stay into a Saturday for this Congress. But better than anything that the smell of jet fumes gets people motivated to vote for legislation and get it done.
God knows. I'll tell you what, I talked to a lot of Republican members just yesterday off the record about this, Lisa. None of them knew what the plan was going to be. And if you heard what Tim Burchett just told us at the top of the hour, he's going to have to hold his nose to vote for another CR. So you wonder how much space they find here. Do they get the NDAA done?
Yeah, I think they do. They're absolutely going to have to get that done. Both of those are must-pass legislation. They've got to get done before the end of the year. It's going to be a mess before it all gets decided. But yeah, I think more than anything, they are going to have to make a decision. Nobody likes the fact that we have to get to a position where we have to have a continuing resolution into the next year. But the truth of it is that they have a job they were elected to do, and that job is to get that business done. And so I think more than anything, they'll be motivated to finish it and get it right, because otherwise it's just another big battle to have to get through over the course of the holidays and into the new year.
I mentioned Tim Burchett. You see, he had his 15-minute Christmas party yesterday. This is like you have to attend this if you're in the House now, I guess. That they didn't have this when you were there, Lisa. 15 minutes. No. He gives you a little cheese whiz on a cracker. You take a picture with Santa and you go on your way. But the question is, who is Santa? Do we have this picture here? Did you see Santos Claus? We spent enough time talking about George Santos in his illustrious political career, Lisa, that you should have a piece of this. There he is with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell wearing the beard and the full outfit. We have clearly come to a new level here in Washington. What do you think?
Yes, I think that it's just silly, and it's what people are really tired of from Washington, D.C. We probably need to clean up our act, I think. Did
Debbie Dingell take that picture on purpose? Merry Christmas, Santos Claus. We are clearly through the looking glass. We'll assemble our panel next. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Let's get the panel back together. It's Friday, and we've got both of our signature panelists with us. The aforementioned Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, Bloomberg politics contributor and Democratic analyst, political science professor at Iona University. And there's Rick Davis, Republican strategist, partner at Stone Court Capital, Bloomberg politics contributors both. Hey, Rick, block the talk. Is it going to happen?
Yeah, look, it's already happened. The question is, who's going to make it unhappen? I don't think there's any chance that it's going to sell between now and the end of the year. And the Supreme Court, I can't imagine them overturning this federal appeals court decision. So government has expended its will. And I think all of this could be sort of settled caseload by the time Donald Trump takes his oath of office on January 20th. So we'll see. But it seems like the blockers are getting the way they want with talk.
Wow. Amazing. Jeannie, what do you think about this? And does Donald Trump really know what he wants? We've heard every version of this. But most recently from the president-elect, he said at least before the election that he is now against a TikTok ban and will work to save, the word he used, the social media platform. Do you think he talked about this with Zuckerberg over dinner?
Oh, I bet they did. And by the way, the best part of this and why we must keep the block the talk is to hear Rick Davis say that repeatedly while we move forward, because it's so fun to listen to. The big question here is going to be, does the Supreme Court grant cert? Do they get 4 justices to agree to hear this case? I am not quite sure they're going to get there. And if that's the case, then this decision by this court will stand. And of course, going forward, it's going to be a question of, does TikTok sell? And what could Donald Trump do at that point to stop that? I mean, they are Republicans taking over the Congress. I suppose that if he exerts pressure, if he's really so intended, he could try to do something, but that is really going to be an uphill battle. So I think unless the Supreme Court takes this case, and, that would just extend this out for a while longer, because if they took it now and heard it, that would be pretty fast to hear it and decide by early next spring for the court.
It's kind of funny, Rick, to be having this conversation after both campaigns used TikTok on the daily, right, to be posting information. You can't get away from this thing. It's the very same people who are debating whether we should ban it that are using it.
Oh, absolutely. But like when you're running a campaign, you use whatever resources are available. And look, there are hundreds of millions of eyeballs on TikTok. So it's not that they haven't been successful. It's that, their links to the Communist Party of China and their pernicious effect on, our young people is enough cause to warrant Congress and this current administration to want to kick them out. And I think that right now, unless Steve Mnuchin or Kevin O'Leary or one of these guys comes out of the woodwork with, tens of billions of dollars of money to buy it from the Chinese, this thing is done.
Wow. Remembering China's got to approve this, too, which is something that we don't always talk about. I want to get to the to-do list here because I'm guessing this is not keeping Mike Johnson up at night. They've already dealt with the legislation. Now we need to deal with closing out this Congress. And Rick and Jeannie, we do have a bit of a roadmap. As of yesterday, House GOP leadership telling us they put the NDAA on the floor next week. The week after, week of December 16, we get a vote on a CR. Everyone leaves town. And then the Senate would take up government funding, I guess, that week of the 20th, which means we're going to walk right up to the line. Jeannie, does that sound like a plan?
It sounds like the 118th Congress, Joe. I was just thinking back, the three of us sat here and talked about what a bizarre Congress this has been from start to finish. 2 years ago when they came in, and now where are we? They are limping their way out. I think it's probably the best case scenario we can think of at this point. But the reality is that this is a Congress that has been really the definition of a do-nothing Congress. They have been really unable to do even the most basic aspects of governing, hence so many people's frustration. The idea that we are going to keep this government funded or hopefully keep it funded again on a CR is just depressing. And I think that is what will likely happen. Best case scenario, neither side sees that it's in their political interest to let the government shut down. And I can't imagine anybody sees that as in their interest right now.
Give us your take on this, Rick. We talked to Tim Burchett a little while ago. He's going to hold his nose, I guess, and vote for what the Republican leadership decides. But are we going to have a situation where we just kick things into early next year and then have to decide whether it's March or September or, God forbid, regular order?
Yeah, look, I think that they'll wind up getting a package put together. I mean, the number one priority, obviously, is the National Defense Authorization Act, and that's scheduled to go, and very little mystery around that getting done. It's just a procedural matter. But look, this has been a do-nothing Congress, and look how well our country's doing. I mean, maybe this should be the pattern in the future is do nothing, don't screw up our country anymore, and then maybe we in the private sector can actually continue to motivate investment and job creation and prosperity. Those are three things that the United States government has never been good at. So, I don't think it's going to be so much about what are we going to get passed this year. That's set in stone now. They'll be working Christmas week, but that won't be the first time that's ever happened. And I think it's a clear slate for the next administration and the Republican Congress to put its stamp on not just this budget that'll, basically run out in March if they stay to the plan, or and the next year's budget, which will give them plenty of time to work their will on that.
Are we going to light up this Christmas tree with anything else here, Rick? I talked to Congressman Burchett, for instance, about emergency funding. There's going to be a supplemental, whether it's attached to this one or the next. But are lawmakers going to be able to attach amendments, get any last-minute prizes under the tree before they go home?
Yeah, they'll try to decorate the tree. And I have no doubt that right now the discussions between the House and Senate are going on to create that supplemental that'll add money to our emergency spending, FEMA, disaster assistance, that kind of thing. Look, we need to help the people who have been affected by these horrible storms, including those in Burkett's district. And I think those are just the most responsible measures. I don't get the sense that they are going to have any trouble getting time limits, for instance, in the Senate to limit the number of amendments. So it won't be like shoot out at OK Corral. It only ends when the bullets are done, and you run out of ammo. I think everyone really wants to get out of here, wants to celebrate the victories on the Republican side and explore their losses on the Democratic side. And I don't see the real burning interest in fighting in Congress right now.
Yeah. One thing that we do know is that there's no agreement on any of this, Jeannie. You talk about the NDAA. The Senate is $25 billion apart from the House, and there's no agreement on top-line numbers for funding the government for the CR. Is there a chance? I'm going to get people upset by asking, is there a chance that we sleepwalk into a shutdown?
Gosh, I hope not. There's always a chance. But again, I don't see it in anybody's interest. But what you just mentioned, Joe, is so important. The timing of this thing. If they only get a short-term extension and that goes until March, think about the impact of that on the president and the new Republican House and Senate's ability to move forward with their really, really ambitious policy agenda. We're already seeing the GOP sort of starting to battle it out between the House and the Senate as to whether, in fact, they should try to do 2 reconciliation bills or 1. Donald Trump has an ambitious agenda. That's why he's been moving forward so quickly, trying to get these appointments done. But imagine if the short-term extension goes until March. and their 100 days is disrupted by that. And add on to that the fact that Donald Trump is entering with the thinnest of thinnest majorities in the House, if you can even call it a majority. And that is going to just make this so much more difficult. A razor thin majority of just one vote and a far more conservative number of members in that MAGA group. And so all of that is going to make it difficult to move forward. So what happens in these next 2 weeks matters so much for the GOP as to what they do going forward, not to mention that Mike Johnson has to have a vote to be speaker again in January. So he's got to try to keep everybody moving forward, knowing that just one or two of them can disrupt his plans to become speaker again.
All I know is Rick Davis's preferred political poll came out this morning on this Jobs Day. That, of course, would not be a poll. It's the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. We're going to be talking about the jobs report and a lot about the economy at the top of our next hour, Rick. What we have here is the highest level since April, hit 74. But at the same time, inflation expectations rose to a 5-month high because people see a greater risk with Donald Trump's proposed tariffs coming into the picture. Which number is more important?
Look, I think they're both important. The good news is consumers are starting to feel the impact of what has been a robust economy for the last 6 months. Came a little bit too late for the Harris campaign, but they are and should be cautious about the future because they have seen good times past and have been disappointed with the economic stewardship of the government that brought us the inflation to begin with. So, I think that both these numbers are not actually in contrast to one another, but predictive of the future. And I think this is one of the big burning questions after the meetings with the Doge Group on Capitol Hill is, are we cutting the budget to reduce the deficit, or are we spending more money to, promote our goals and objectives, with these policy positions? And both of those don't work together.
Great to have you both with us. As always, they're our signature panel, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Really glad to say that we can spend some time with Jim Himes today. The gentleman from Connecticut is with us here. Democratic Congressman, ranking member, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He's also a member of the Financial Services Committee. Congressman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. We've been talking about TikTok all day long, and it wouldn't be the first time that you and I have spoken about this. I remember distinctly you're voting against that bill, the divest or ban bill, when it was standalone, and voted for it when it was part of a larger package that included a bunch of things, including Ukraine funding. Where's your head on this today?
Yeah, so my head is where it always has been, which is, I remain deeply uncomfortable with the United States government telling the citizens of the United States that there are media outlets that they cannot have access to. Now, I'm the senior Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, so I have a pretty specific sense for what China is able to do. I also know that to date, they have not used TikTok as a way to either exfiltrate information on Americans or as a way to try to influence Americans. So, we're talking about a potential danger, no question about that. But, before the appellate ruling on, just today, I guess it was, I thought it would be pretty clearly unconstitutional for the government to take the position it had. Now I guess they'll either go to the full appellate court or the Supreme Court for a final decision on the constitutionality.
Yeah, ByteDance says it will appeal this to the Supreme Court, or I guess TikTok in this case. A lot of this seems to be resting on what Donald Trump wants to do. I don't know if you see it that way, Congressman, but he's had an evolution here, having tried to ban TikTok at one point. He now says he wants to save the platform. But I guess I'm not sure how that would work. Now that this is law, and based on the court ruling we saw today, that might not be changing unless, of course, Mike Johnson crafts a whole new bill to overturn what has been passed. Would you support that effort?
Well, you ask a really interesting question, right? I mean, Donald Trump is pretty attuned to those things that would reduce his popularity. and I'm told that almost half of Americans, whatever it is, 175 million or so, have accounts on TikTok, especially young people. You're, setting aside the constitutionality and all the other national security questions here, wow, talk about a major disruption. So my guess is that Donald Trump, attuned as he is to his own popularity, may come into this saying, can I find a way to postpone this or to, try to engineer an acquisition of the property away from ByteDance. But my guess is that he's going to kind of double down on his opposition to it, just because if it happens on his watch, look, he can try to blame Joe Biden, who signed the law, but it'll happen on his watch. And my guess is that that's not going to be a comfortable moment for him.
As we spend time with Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, a couple things I'd love to ask you about. Starting with the lame duck session, we've got a funding deadline in 2 weeks. Congressman, is there going to be a deal here in time to avoid a shutdown? And how much time will that provide? We're hearing stories about potentially kicking the can into early next year so you can revisit the budget issue in a new Congress. There's some Republicans, though, say kick it all the way to September so Donald Trump doesn't have to worry about it. Where are you?
Wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a country where the president's worries weren't what determined whether we have a budget for the United States of America or not? But anyway, I think the answer to your question is pretty clear. Yes, the budget expires on January 20th. No, there will not be, other than maybe a couple of fringy social media colleagues that I have, there will be zero appetite for a risk of a government shutdown, especially going into a period when we're going to have a Republican House, Senate, and presidency. There's going to be zero appetite for the kind of histrionics that led to shutdowns in the past. So my guess is that no, there won't be a shutdown. In fact, they may even try to get it done earlier than December 20th so that people can go home for the holidays. My best guess is that they kick it into, probably late winter, early spring. And if I were a Republican, I would say, why not? At that point, we've got the House and the Senate and the presidency, so we can work our will. But that's my best guess as to how this proceeds.
Congressman, you're the ranking member, as we have already determined here, on the Intelligence Committee. And there's a wild story unfolding in Syria right now that's difficult to tell where it is going, with government forces reinforcing some strongholds here, even as rebel fighters make their way closer to Damascus. I know that you can't predict the way this is going to end, but I wonder if this story is going to revisit Tulsi Gabbard's relationship with Bashar al-Assad. It's something that you know more about than most Americans, and how that might impact her confirmation process to be the next DNI. Yeah, interesting. The Tulsi angle is an interesting one. One of the many causes of concern for Tulsi Gabbard, and I think the reason you asked the question is that after Bashar al-Assad, gassed his own people and just did, all that horrible stuff during the Obama administration. After all of that, Tulsi Gabbard went to Damascus to sit with him. And you sort of scratch your head and say, what the heck is happening there? I can't imagine it's a happy thing for Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation process in the Senate to have all of the senators and much of the world reminded of what an appalling character Assad is. So, yeah, I'm sure I don't think Tulsi's timing was, or at least the timing of this rebellion against Assad was particularly good for Tulsi Gabbard. But look, it's a remarkable event. It's pretty clear that the rebels saw that Assad's helpers, that is to say the Iranians and the Russians, are, shall we say, occupied elsewhere, and took advantage of that fact to really make remarkable gains. They've taken the city of Aleppo. I understand they may have taken some of the cities on the way to Damascus, Homs and Hama. And it looks like the Assad regime is collapsing. And now, by the way, when I say collapsing, that doesn't mean that he's on a plane out of there, but it sort of feels like the regime now is in control largely of Damascus and the surrounding areas. When you hear members of Congress call Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset, what do you say?
I am not a fan of hyperbole, and I think that people in positions of responsibility should be very careful about the language they use. There's no reason to believe that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian asset. There is also no reason to believe that she has the experience or the temperament necessary to have the top position in our intelligence community. But look, when we start throwing around loose language like that, what we do is we degrade the quality of the really important conversations that we do need to have about our national security.
I appreciate that answer. I've only got about 2 minutes left, Congressman. I want to ask you about something important that is personal to you, and that is a series of bomb threats that were posed against yourself and other members of the Connecticut and New England House delegations. You issued a statement about this on the 28th of November. You were notified of a bomb threat targeting your home while you were celebrating Thanksgiving with your family. based on the multiple assassination attempts that we saw against Donald Trump during the campaign, this, of course, now the killing of a prominent healthcare CEO in Midtown Manhattan, is it about time that members of Congress are provided security details?
Yeah, I've been doing this for a little while now, 16 years to be exact. And honestly, I have never felt, perhaps with the exception of January 6, 2021, when my workplace was attacked as we were trying to tally the electoral votes, I've really never felt insecure. A bomb threat on Thanksgiving is an awful thing, but it was also very clear right up front that this was not a serious thing. So before I went to providing a security detail for all 535 members of Congress, I would say it would really help if we as leaders, but as the American people, as citizens of a great democracy, would work really hard to take the tone of our conversations down. Is that going to solve the problem? No, it won't. But if we start using decent language and start treating each other as fellow Americans, a lot of this stuff will eventually begin to dissipate.
Congressman Jim Himes, Democrat from Connecticut, we thank you, sir, for the insights today. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. This is Bloomberg. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.